I've seen better games than this in the bottom of a toilet bowl after eating 3-week-old clams. I'm Mike and this is Game Night with Mike, and what you're looking at right now is technically a video game. At least I think it is. Wikipedia says the definition of a video game is, quote, an electronic game that involves human interaction with a user interface to generate visual feedback on a video device. By that definition, I think this is a video game. By every other definition, though, this is a stinking pile of cow feces that should both be fired directly into the sun and serve as a lesson in how bloated and ridiculous Steam has become as a distribution platform. Now, this review was originally going to be about a different game, but I got my release dates mixed up and decided to browse through the recently released list on Steam to find something interesting to take a look at. I happened upon Zion in that new releases area and saw that it was only $3. It was billed as an apocalyptic shooter, and it had only a handful of reviews that were, to put it delicately, awful. Normally at that point I would have gone on to find something else instead, but there was just something about the game that screamed review me. Maybe it was the price point, maybe it was the so odd they were intriguing screenshots, or maybe it was the fact that it only had a few reviews and there's no way that the game could possibly be as bad as they described, especially after that mess that was Fleeting Ages. Now let this be a lesson to you, there is never a game that is so terrible that there can't be one that's worse, except for this one. I don't think that there could be a worse game than this even if you actively tried to make one. Of course, I say that now, but just wait another week or two and I'll probably find something even worse. Created and released by one Vitaly Gentsar, Zion takes place in a world after some sort of robotic aliens have taken over, driving humanity somewhere and leaving cities that are devoid of life but still filled with large numbers of human-killing robots roaming around and getting stuck on objects. As a physically idiot savant super soldier who is capable of running forever without stopping but can't carry more than a few magazines worth of ammunition, your job is to enter the city, elude the robots, and complete several missions. What those missions are isn't exactly clear for two reasons. First, because the game's introductory text is both in broken English and extends off the edge of the screen. Second, because the text on the user interface blends in extremely well with the so-called background of the game, making it nearly invisible depending on where you're looking. Now, if you do manage to figure out what your missions are, you can run around in a large, flat desert area that's filled with copy-pasted grass and trees, buildings that don't render properly, and a sky that is oddly out of place with the rest of the game. Running to the mission areas is a boring, mundane task punctuated with the vague possibility of encountering a robot on the way, or having to take the long way around an absurdly long line of apartment buildings. And seriously, who designs a city like this? If you do encounter robotic enemies, your only real recourse is to run. You can theoretically fight them, but doing so successfully would probably require your weapons to actually work. See, your weapons, an AR-style rifle and a rocket launcher, don't shoot properly, don't reload automatically, don't aim correctly, and give little to no indication that you've actually fired them. Bullets and rockets don't seem to travel from the gun to their target, but instead appear instantly at their target instead, with bullets giving off no hit markers, while rockets cause generic explosion graphic number 18 to appear on the screen. Reloading causes the guns to zoom toward the screen like they do when you hit the right mouse button in what looks like some sort of ADS bug, but there's no reason for it. Targets that are susceptible to at least rifle attacks are in the shape of the upper torsos of some kind of freakish human-robot zombie hybrid that crawls rapidly towards you upon detection and starts munching on your soft spots. When dispatched, these creatures immediately break up into gibs, which disappear, as the garbage collection service in the future is very efficient when it comes to dead psychotic human-robot zombie hybrid parts. Zion's graphics are, as you can see, just ridiculous. There are several models in the game though that are incredibly well put together, and while I have absolutely no proof of this, I suspect that these come from a third-party library as they are a few orders of magnitude better than the rest of the game. Or perhaps the developer put 99% of his time into developing those models and then spent the remaining 1% slapping them into a map. If that's the case though, then I don't see why there are so many broken and just bad-looking models in the rest of the game. Something doesn't add up here. Those models aside, the graphics in the game, I mean, just look at them. Oh, and just because they're awful doesn't mean that the game runs well either. I consistently got under 30 frames per second, and when I went into the tiny underground area, it was under 20 frames per second. The game is so unoptimized that you'd almost think it was purposely built to run this poorly. I don't have any other explanation for why a few stock trees, buildings, and grass models would cause things to chug along. I mean, it probably has something to do with stuff being rendered far out in the distance when it shouldn't be, but isn't this the kind of thing that game developers learn how to do fairly early on in their careers? Or maybe the awesome blood-pouring graphics in the ceiling in the underground area cause the frame rate to drop across the entire game. Now, the game's text, as I mentioned earlier, blends in with the background so well that you can barely make anything out on the options menu, and the text instructions in the game are written in broken English and overflow the screen border so you can't read everything that's written. This works well with the lack of response in the UI too, where every button you press may or may not actually be pressed, but you don't know since there's no feedback. There is, as you may have have guessed at this point no game really present in Zion. Sure, you can run around, shoot a gun, and jump, but with all the crap that this is loaded down with, you might as well just call this Terrible Game Simulator 2016 and slap a $10 price tag on it. And now that I think about it, that would actually make for a great game. Except I think that game already exists, except you play as a goat, and it's actually a lot of fun. Let's be clear, Zion is not fun and does not feature a goat as the main character, so your chances of having fun while playing this game are about the same as if you were to smash your face against a sack full of rusty nails. Zion's developer has another game out on Steam called Project Pulsation, whose only positive reviews are suspiciously similar in phrasing and which looks like the kind of game that you would develop in the first month of your freshman year in a video game development course. Zion shares this trait in literally every aspect, from the graphics and user interface to the sound and controls. It is a prime example of why Steam as a distribution service needs to radically change how it operates or risk permanently gaining that reputation of a store that will sell any piece of garbage that someone throws at them. It already has that reputation to some degree, but games like this will only solidify and enhance it. And there are plenty of people who have talked about Steam's problems with more detail and eloquence than I could hope to do, and practically speaking, Zion is but a tiny blemish that's part of a much larger stain on Steam's reputation. Zion's impact by itself amounts to virtually nothing, but it seems that Steam may be going through the death of 1,000 cuts. At some point, these terrible games will reach a critical mass, and at that point, Steam will move from the PC Master Race's prime choice to a second or third rate service. The internet's opinion is nothing if not fickle, and while the voices that clamor the loudest are often in the smallest minority, they can and do have an effect that will taint the view of users who are less vocal and extreme. Zion is nothing more than a lame attempt to grab some cash from Steam users who are too naive to know about the refund policy. Vitaly Gintsar's work on this game amounts to throwing some stock textures and models into an engine, adding a few scripted events, pressing the compile button, and calling it a day. The most it does is serve as a source of humor for people like myself, and a reminder that not all independent games are worth playing. I'm Mike, and this is Game Night with Mike. If you're not already a subscriber, please consider subscribing today. Thanks, and I'll be back again soon.